Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here again. This talk was originally going to be entitled Practice for the Places in Between. I'll tell you about that because there was a workshop I went to online with Rebecca Solnit at Upaya Zen Center. But the more I've spent time thinking about what we could talk about today and reflecting about where we're at in the seasons of the year and the reality of our lives, the talk is now entitled Practice as if everything matters. Practice as if everything matters. In the ancient Chan tradition, which was the Chinese version of Buddhism that led to Zen in Japan, it said that in our world, things are always getting broken and mended and broken again. And there is also something that never breaks. Everything rises and falls, and yet at exactly that same moment, things are eternal and go nowhere at all. How do we see with a kind of binocular vision, one eye aware of how things are coming and going all the time, the other aware of how they're never moved at all? How do we experience this not as two separate ways of seeing, but as one seamless field of vision? In Chan practice, like in our practice here at GBF, it's not about getting free of the world. It's about being free in the world. So that's sort of what I've been thinking about. It's the idea that there's so many things going on right now, and yet, if you think about it, the average age in this room being whatever it is, we have seen a few winters before, and they come and they go, and each one's a little bit different. But from a certain vantage point, when you turn around and look back, you know, they're kind of all the same as it was. This week, I walked with one friend at the beach and actually got a little bit of a sunburn on that particular day. And then it was such a nice experience that I asked another friend, a Buddhist student of mine, to go meditate at the beach. And so we did. And we meditated in the pouring rain, sitting on a log on the beach. Both of those are San Francisco winters. But as everybody knows, as he mentioned, my Sangha that I formed 3 years ago is called Ocean's Compassion. And it's because for me, the ocean has always been the 30 years I've lived here, where I go to find peace and connection. You watch the waves come in and they're crashing and they're covered in foam and they're very loud and wonderful noise. And then they hit the beach and they go right back out and simply become part of the ocean again. The big roar of the wave being present and not present. So Peter Mathiasson, who some of you know wrote the White Leopard, something. That one, yeah, whatever that is, he wrote. It was a good book, and some others. But he has a quote that goes like this: "To practice Buddhism means to realize one's existence moment after moment, rather than letting life unravel in the regret of the past or daydreaming about the future. To rest in the present is a state of magical simplicity, and out of the emptiness we can come into a true insight of the natural harmony of all creation." So what Peter taught and others have taught in Buddhism is that oftentimes the chaos that exists around us, or certainly in the last couple of months, probably for a lot of us, the chaos that we feel overwhelming us from other sections of our country and our society, oftentimes has less to do with what the chaos actually is and more to do with how we respond to it, how we accept it, how we choose to engage with it, and what we choose to do about it. I think we don't want to talk about politics today, and I'm not going to. And any of you that believe that, let me know. But I actually Googled, just as I was getting ready yesterday afternoon, I Googled, don't talk about politics or religion. just to see what there was, and Google was nice enough to spit up 444 references to don't talk about politics. All of which, the first couple that I looked at basically said, you're going to do it, so just get over it. Like, we go to our families, we say, well, there's certain things we're not going to talk about because it will cause conflict. Or we go to our workplaces and we say, well, at work, we only talk about certain things because it will cause conflict. And what we know for sure is that we're carrying all of that with us when we go. And so we can choose not to talk about it. And sometimes that's a wise decision. But I think that when we choose not to talk about those things that are important to us, what's required of us, it seems to me, as spiritual people, is that we find other places where we can talk about it. So when we come to GBF or any other Sangha that we happen to practice with, I think we come here to seek refuge, right? We come here to seek refuge. This is not a debating society, and it's not the local Democratic Party or whatever other party you might want it to be. And so some of us might think, well, there's all this stuff going on in the world, and, everything from the condition of the planet, as our friends in Los Angeles can truly attest, and people all over the world, to the political stuff that's going on, both here in San Francisco and in the Bay Area and across the globe. But I think we come here seeking refuge from that. And I think that's a perfectly appropriate thing for Buddhists to be seeking. But I think there's that nagging feeling some of us get about, well, shouldn't we be engaged? Shouldn't we be doing something? And I think that we get to celebrate today a different point of view, which is that we are doing something. That when we come here and we get quiet, we get the opportunity to just be still. And we get the opportunity to connect our heart and our mind, which during the course of the day and the week and the rest of our lives sometimes can get disconnected. And so when we come here, we're doing that. And Thich Nhat Hanh used to have a wonderful teaching. And when he was teaching about metta practice, which is loving kindness, if somebody doesn't know, and he says this: if you look around this room, say there are 35 of us here, and we spend 90 minutes in this Sangha together. We're not watching CNN or MSNBC or Fox News. We're not debating with anybody. And if the 35 of us are here for 90 minutes practicing the Buddha Dharma, that's 52 hours of clock time that we are not creating drama out there in the world. And I don't know all of you, but I do know there's some drama creators in this world. And those are the ones I'd like to meet afterwards, please. But we know that during the time that we're here, we've saved the planet of 52 hours of us being concerned about all sorts of things, many of which that we don't have a single ability to do anything about in the moment. And so I went to a wonderful workshop that was here in San Francisco. I hope some of you got to go to it. It was online. And it was a teacher named Norma Kawaloku Wong. And she's written a new book, and it's called When No Thing Works. When No Thing Works. And so some of you know I try to be perpetually upbeat and cheery, whatever's actually going on inside, but that's the presentation. So I was very excited about this workshop when I read a Zen and Indigenous perspective on resilience, shared purpose, and leadership. And I thought, that's great. And then, as is often the case, I hadn't read the whole thing. The full subtitle of the book is In a Time, Place of Collapse. There I was, having paid my little fee and sitting, of course, front and center where I couldn't escape. But what's good about what she teaches, she's a Roshi Zen teacher from Hawaii. And what's good about what she teaches, for me, was very simple. If you want to understand how things can come together, you have to honor and understand the ways and whys of how they are falling apart. But she doesn't. Nothing in what she talks about it from a situation of doom and gloom. She's really talking about that there are things we can do to make the world in which we live and that we share with our loved ones, our families, our housemates, our spouses, our children, our parents. There are ways in which we can make the world a little easier to live in and a little more. And what she says, and what I say, and what other Buddhist teachers say, is the real issue there is connection. The real issue is to feel connection. Thich Nhat Hanh said it this way: all of us are looking for solid ground, our true home, a place where we can feel safe and comfortable, fulfilled, and no longer lonely. But where is home? The Buddha teaches us that home starts inside us, inside of us, that there is a peaceful island within us that we can go back to through meditation, through mindful awareness, and through practice. When we come back to ourselves, taking refuge in our inner and peaceful island, we become a home for ourselves that's safe and connected and comfortable. And when we are that, we also provide a refuge for others who encounter us. And so I heard a talk by a guy named Olmsted who was talking about spontaneous teacher, spontaneous student. And so one of the things that we know in Buddhism is that sometimes people sit over in this chair and sometimes they sit on those cushions or in those chairs, but we're all teachers and we're all students. Mm-hmm. And what happens is that, some people get to say their, whatever it was we introduced me as today, whichever title it was, I'm in a couple of places in my life where somebody has designated me to be a teacher. And there have certainly been times in both my Buddhist practice and in what I do in community mental health, that I've thought, I must know some things, so let me share them with you. And hopefully that's true. But what I've learned and what's so important about the teachings that Roshi Norma talks about in this book is that we should have something called collective reflection. And what she says is that she has this wonderful concept that's called collective acceleration. Does that sound interesting? Collective acceleration. And she's just as charming as she was me. And she said, first of all, I want to tell you that I made that expression up. And she said, the reason I'm telling you I made it up is because I gave a talk in Philadelphia and a scientist, a physicist stood up in the back and said, by the way, that actually that means something in physics. And she said, oh, well, does it mean sort of what we're suggesting here? And he said, well, I don't know. Go ahead and tell me what you're suggesting. She said, okay. She said, we can hear a story. And, our lives are all about stories and telling stories. We can hear a story from Fox News or from wherever we hear it from. I frequently, during the last year, have been very careful to curate the amount of news I take in from any of those sources. But I'm an old person. I live in West Portland. I'm retired, sort of. So I go to Pete's Coffee in West Portland all the time, or Ballast Coffee, and I get my news from other people my age who are sitting around interpreting the news. I don't know who they are, and I don't know what the source of their getting the news was. I do know some of them are occasionally hysterical about what's going on. And so that's what she says. She says that there's this collective thing that's happened, this collective amping up, and that we have this capacity to get together, and I'm hysterical about something, and then I share it with you, and you get hysterical with me because we're, that's what we do. We connect with each other, and then you tell him, and he gets a little more hysterical, and he tells him. By the time we're out of here, everybody's hair is on fire, and we find out that the source of the news was fill in the blank, whoever your favorite villain is at the moment. And so what she suggests is that if we take the backward step, as we often do in Buddhism, and we say, let me accept things as they are. So you take a backward step and say, okay, that information is out there. And that information is out there in the context of Pete's Coffee in West Portal. And then there's the rest of West Portal, where you can now go across the street and buy an $11 donut at the new place. I haven't done it yet, only because the line is too long and other people want to do it. But you just take a step back and you take a further step back, and 15 minutes away down Slope Street is the ocean. And so for me, I could listen to all that stuff, which I sometimes do, or I could say, you know what, let me take this cup of coffee and walk down Slope Street and go to Mother Ocean and see what's going on. So I think that when we come here, we have the opportunity for a period of time, at least, not to be taken in any of that kind of news, even if the person that sits up here has a strong political bent, which I must confess from time to time, I've shared more politics than I think I will ever do from this seat again, because it seemed at the moment like it was the right thing to do. And I've now rethought that, because I think this collective amping up, it can happen lots of places. It doesn't need to happen here. And I think that's because in Buddhist practice, in metta practice, this loving kindness, it starts with being calm here, being centered here. And a piece of that, taking the backward step and looking at things in context, a piece of that is to not sugarcoat things and pretend like there's not stuff going on with the planet and with politics and with healthcare and with hunger that don't deserve our attention. But the fact of the matter is, when I teach meditation to new students, one of the things I say is you will sit on the cushions or in your chair and sit quietly, and you'll form just the right posture for you. And you'll never be satisfied with it, by the way, but you'll form that right posture. And then you will start to breathe, and you'll breathe in and you'll breathe out. You'll never be satisfied with that either. And then you'll say the third component. The third component is to quiet my mind. And as we all know, according to some studies, some of our brains come up with 60,000 separate thoughts a day. So during the 30 minutes that we sit, you'll be thinking, I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm just not. There it is. I'm thinking about not thinking about anything else. I can't believe I'm still not thinking about other. And so the opportunity that we have is to just be still. And I have a little story about that, which is, I had this occasion that to be talking to my own therapist, and I was telling him about being retired. And some of you have heard this from me before, and some of you know me, so you don't even have to hear it. But I was mentioning that I stopped teaching at CIS, the university, a couple of years ago. I retired, but then I was still teaching an occasional course. And I stopped teaching because all the courses were online and asynchronous. If you know what that means, anybody under my age probably does. Asynchronous means you never actually are in a room or even a Zoom screen with these people. You deliver a little lecture on video, and then you give them some questions and they answer the question. It's great for students on the rush. They never have to, they can study in the middle of the night or 2 minutes before the semester's over, whatever it is, whatever it is they want to do. But when I teach at the university, I'm teaching people how to be psychotherapists. And the idea that you would do that for 16 weeks without ever looking at them face to face or helping them to know what you need to know when you want to respond to people didn't make sense to me. So roll forward to this year, and they called me and said, students are clamoring for faculty who teach in the classroom. They want to come back. And I thought, good, there's hope for the world. And so I quickly said yes. And then they said, oh, he quickly said yes. So bottom line is that I'm teaching 3 courses this semester, which, if you know about graduate schools, that's full-time work. So I'm retired and working full-time. The only difference is no benefits. So I was telling this to my therapist, and he said to me, do you understand what the word retired means? He said, don't you also have a Sangha and that list of Sanghas that you participate in and you see clients in psychotherapy? I said, yeah. He said, your task between now and the next time, CBT people, they always give you a task, is to go home and look up the word retired, figure out what it means. And then he looked at me, and he's one of us. And so he looked at me and he said, the real situation here is that what retirement means for you, he said, is getting comfortable with being still. And I took a breath and I thought of 400 things I wanted to say to him right at that moment. And he said, I heard that in the talk you gave at GBF. So nobody repeat anything I said. So for me, I've said to you, I really believe that walking by the ocean is healing and supportive and nurturing. But the fact of the matter is that where I found myself is, and he was quite right, not being particularly comfortable with being still. The idea of sitting home, just reading a book or doing other things like that doesn't really work for me. So I took a look at one of my favorite teachers, Thich Nhat Hanh, and he has some teachings about being still. And what he said is it's a practice of quieting both the body and the mind through your meditation practice, allowing for a deep awareness of the present moment without reactive thoughts or distractions. So he recommends to live in the moment. Meditation and prayer will get you there. To let go of expectations and resentments about others, about your own hard life, quote unquote, and then eventually about yourself, whatever it is you might be carrying around. And then he says the third thing, of course, is to appreciate the day that we're in. Appreciate the day that you're living in. And again, that's that context, I think, that, it seems like, some things are going on politically, or the planet's getting warmer, and the ocean's at risk and all that sort of stuff. But it's like, what can you do in your life, little things that you can do right now, to just appreciate the beauty. I had an opportunity with a friend yesterday to go to the botanical garden and walk around for a couple hours, and it's like right in the middle of this city is this beautiful, beautiful place. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I don't get there nearly often enough. So that we have the ocean, we have the botanical gardens, we have Golden Gate Park, we have the tunnel tops. How many folks have been to the tunnel top park? Yeah, good. Go back, because it's definitely worth it. So those are the things, like, to really get clear with ways in which we can appreciate the moment we're in. And again, not to pretend like none of the rest of it's happening, but to give us a foundation, with which to engage as speaks to us. And we'll get to that in a minute. But I just wanted to say quickly that the second feature that brought me to this place of wanting to talk about practices if everything matters is 2 weeks ago, two of my very good friends had the occasion to put their best friends into long-term care or hospice care. And I've been involved over the years in making that decision, helping to make that decision for a number of people, because for a variety of reasons, people ask me to do that. And I'm just warning you, don't ask me, because in July I go on vacation. And if you get a bad cold at the end of June, the decision might not be clean. Just kidding, just kidding. But for some reason, people keep asking me, but in this case, these were two good friends who had to make this decision. And neither of the other two folks were quite ready. They were ready, they knew they had to go, but not quite ready. So it was a process. It was a heartbreaking process for all four of them and other people around them. And ultimately they went, and actually one of them passed away earlier this week. So dedicate the merit of these words to John and his care team and the people that were with him. And I thought, so what was my reaction to that as I was trying to be there and be present and be supportive? And my reaction was, oh, woe is me. Now, it turns out all four of those guys, the two that went in and the two that made the decision to put them in, are all younger than I am, significantly in one of the cases. And I thought, oh, man, so because of the age of myself and the people that are in my life, when am I going to have to be involved in making that decision? And so that was one level of spin, and I don't need to tell you what the next level was. It's like, when is somebody going to tap me on the shoulder and say, "Get your bag and come with us"? Do you know the words Laguna Honda? So for me, it was just like that, and I thought, so what can I do with that? Well, here's what I'm suggesting that we do, is to find a simple way. So a simple way for me was to say, do I have a care plan made up for what happens to me when I do that? And do my friends that I'm in close communication with, that I'm in that inner circle, do they have a plan? And so what I thought I could do is, instead of saying, oh, woe is me, is create my plan and make sure it's got it out and tightened it up and cleaned it up and made sure the people that need to know about it know where it is and what it's about. And then I could come here and tell all of you that, because whatever ages we are, we all think, oh yeah, I keep meaning to get to writing one of those. I keep meaning to having a healthcare proxy. I keep meaning to have my business taken care of. And if you're like me and most other people, according to statistics, you haven't actually done it in a while. So a simple thing we can do is, instead of saying, I might die, or I might have to be put in Laguna Honda, or you might die, or I might have to take you to Laguna Honda, is just to say, is there a plan for what happens? Perhaps with a specific sentence that says, do not take me to Laguna Honda, whatever it might be, whatever it might be. So that's, I think, the kind of thing that we can do when we operate from a calm place, a centered place, a place of metta, loving kindness. We say, what's a simple thing I could do, which is just to remind, the 35 of us that are here, that at some point this week, take a look at your care plan and make sure that it's in good shape and that everybody that needs to have a copy. And that's Buddhist practice. That's taking care of ourselves and each other. The third thing, and this is a little bit political, but it's not about the politics, it's about me. So I was on the way to, I was watching something on TV and I went to get ready for bed and I was walking back and I'd forgotten to shut off the TV. So I went into the living room to shut it off and the newscaster with great dignity said, the president has figured out a way to bring peace to the Middle East. Now I thought, I truly need to stop and pay attention to this. So most of you probably know, but I have, because I've been curating and not paying attention, I had no idea how out there things had gotten. So here was his 4-part plan. And I just, again, not political, just I'll tell you how I responded to it. Number one, he wants to take over the Gaza Strip as American property, is specifically. 2, he thinks it would make a great Riviera, like the French Riviera, that someone could open a big hotel complex there. 3, in terms of peace, all the Palestinians will have to leave while the transition takes place. And 4, none of them can come here. So that the newscaster repeated those 4 steps as though he were on the same planet that you and I are on. And as though getting paid to say those things didn't cause him a little bit of angst, which I'm guessing it did. But for me, which is what I really want to talk about, and us as Buddhists, I had a different reaction when I heard that. I didn't laugh, and I didn't cry, which since then I have cried thinking about that a little bit. But I just thought, I don't understand. I don't understand what that was that just got said, how it could be said, and how anybody, including that well-paid newscaster, could say that as though without, calling it to question. But instead of freaking out and getting all alarmed and upset at 11:30 at night, which is very late for somebody my age, I went into my other room. I went to the other part of the room where the altar is, and I rang my big bell and I lit an incense and I did a prostration and I sat down in my meditation chair, and all alone in my home, I turned to practice. I did exactly what Thich Nhat Hanh talks about and other teachers talk about. I turned to practice. There's nothing I could do about somebody's plan to turn a devastated part of the world into a French Riviera type resort. But what I could do was practice, and I could get still, and I could say, what are the strengths that I can bring to whoever I encounter tomorrow, starting with me? So what are the things that I could do? After 30 minutes, I sat up, I took a few more deep breaths and did a little bit of stretching, and acknowledged that I was safe in my home in San Francisco, California, and that nobody that evening or the next day was going to be taking me to the hospice or to Laguna Honda. And that I knew in the Maha Sangha, the big Sangha, that some of you were probably meditating at the same time, maybe across the globe somewhere, where the time would make that happen. But if you weren't, by early in the morning, many of us would have had an opportunity to sit together and meditate together, and that we were meditating together anyway. So Master Dogen said to us that practice, specifically Zazen, this meditation practice, can be the gateway to bliss and joy. And most of us think, well, that's kind of taking a spiritual bypass to what's really going on in the world. But I think that it's not. I think that that we have this opportunity to say, what else is possible, right? So here's the world, and it seems to be, flying around and out on the fringes, but we can come back to the center. We can come back to the people that we are, loving kindness, and I can feel that for myself and understand that I deserve that, which I certainly haven't always believed. And then if I do that, I can share it with each of you, and encourage each of you to share it with everybody else. And so I'm currently co-teaching a class at this Zen Institute with a person who is a very senior Zen teacher who I've respected for a long time. And she says that she refers to herself as the Queen of Darkness. And she says that's because she understands that the central tenet of Buddhism is the first noble truth, that there is suffering. And during the last presentation that I heard her make, she said there with exactly that, is about 8 times. And so I felt the only thing I could feel was that when it was my turn, I said, I would be the Queen of Light. And I think there's a third noble truth, and it is that there's the end of suffering, and that we can do something about that. And so she said, because she's very friendly and supportive, always, she said, well, you don't take Buddhism seriously enough. And she said, I can give you several things that you should read that would help you to focus on the First Noble Truth. And so I said, with deep love and respect, I said, all I have to do is be around you to know about suffering. Happily, I'm a person in recovery, so I can make amends later. So the fact is that I do understand, and we all understand suffering. Suffering is called dukkha in the original Pali. And here's just a quote from one of the ancient teachings. Aging is dukkha, birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, death is dukkha, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair are all dukkha. Associations with what is not loved is dukkha. Separation from what is loved is dukkha. Not getting what we want is dukkha. In short, everything's dukkha, right? Everything's dukkha. And then I turned to a teaching by Tuiku Rinpoche, a beloved Tibetan teacher who passed away 2 years ago. And he says dukkha should be known. The causes by which dukkha comes into play should be known. The diversity of dukkha should be known. The results of dukkha should be known. And the cessation of dukkha must be known. The path to the cessation of dukkha must be known. As it is necessary to diagnose the sickness, to abandon its causes, and to attain happiness in good health, and to apply the medicine needed to be in good health. So suffering, its causes, as well as the end of suffering, should be recognized and attained. And I thought, yeah, I want to practice with you. And so that seemed like a really good thing. So I think what we know at this point is we don't know. That's a really good thing. And Rebecca Solnit, who's an earth activist and a person I really, really, really care about, as I mentioned, she gave a talk and it was called Navigating the In-Between Spaces. And she just really stressed how important it is for us to not think we know what's going to happen with the planet, but don't let that intimidate us from doing things to improve that. We don't know what's going to happen with political leadership here or in the many other countries around the world that seem to be taking a backward step to repression and homophobia and transphobia and sexism and misogyny. We don't know any of that. But Rebecca Solnit said it this way: we do not know what will happen, but what we know through our practice and fellowship is who we can be in the face of whatever arises, right? Who we can be in the face of whatever arises. And so I really value that. And I think it's so important for us to get comfortable with that. We don't know. I said to many of the patients that I have, clients that I have, and students that I have, and and just friends that I encounter, were saying between the election and today that, oh my God, I just keep imagining worst case scenarios. And some of you have heard me say this in other settings, but I tell everybody, don't do that. First of all, imagining worst case scenarios activates that part of your brain that will send messages through your nerve systems, your vagus nerve system, that says we're in danger and we have to be on guard and we have to be, hysterical, to use that word. And what that does is really not help. Right? It keeps us, if the radar is up all the time, it's burning up a lot of energy and it's making us, it's having us be in that defensive posture. And what we do know for absolute sure is that has a negative impact on your immune system, right? It wears out your body, and that constantly being on guard and alert. And so if you're imagining worst case scenarios all the time, then, you're making yourself more available for other kinds of stressors and disease. And as everybody knows who has been reading the newspaper, we currently have epidemics of the flu and RSV, and COVID is back coming up, and other things going on, because for a lot of reasons that are far more medically and scientifically accurate than just this. But I also firmly believe we have it because people are so exhausted from worry and stress and thinking of worst case scenarios. So I wouldn't say to ignore any of that stuff that's going on, but what I would say, and I also say to people who are not quite sure they can get off having worst case scenarios, is we can't even imagine what that guy in Washington, the worst case scenario, because if somebody would have talked about it 2 months ago about the people he'd appoint and the things he would do on the first couple of weeks, no one, I don't think any of you, unless you're creative writers by profession, would have been able to imagine some of that what's going on. But the other piece that I think is important is in Buddhism, we have a concept that says not knowing is most intimate. Not knowing is most intimate. Being comfortable with the fact that we don't actually know. And I might have strong opinions, and I might think they're versed in years of study and collective reflection with other people. But we really don't know. We really don't know. And that's an important thing. And it's important because the concept encourages us as practitioners of Buddhism to let go of the need to control the situation we're in. And to know that probably we don't control most of them anyway, right? Anytime two people come together, I can get up in the morning and think, I'm filled with peace and love and joy. And I walk out the door and meet one of my neighbors, and, that might go all right. Meet the other neighbor, and, suddenly they're complaining about something, and I'm like, yeah, that's awful. And then by the time I get to the subway, there's 3 people complaining that Muni's not running the way it used to. And I'm like, yeah, that's awful. And by the time I get on the subway to come here and be peaceful and joyful, I'm already pissed off about Muni. And I'm here. So Muni worked. So, that's the point. But there's a writing by a woman named Rainya Naam, and she says, I'm slowly learning that I do not have to react to everything that bothers me. Sometimes it's better to just let things be. I'm slowly learning that I don't have to hurt those who hurt me. I'm slowly learning that the energy it takes to react to every bad thing that happens drains you and stops you from seeing the good things in life. I'm slowly learning that not reacting doesn't mean I'm okay with things. It means I'm choosing at this moment to rise above those things. I'm slowly learning that reacting to things that upset you gives someone else the power over your emotions. I'm slowly learning that reacting to things that upset you might give someone else the power over your emotions. And finally, I'm slowly learning that life is better lived when you don't center it on what's happening around you, but that you center it on what's happening inside you. Okay. So we have this opportunity then, I think, as Buddhists to really think about what it is we're doing. And when we get to the place where everything seems like a crisis, we get a chance to think about, you've all heard people say that the Chinese characters for crisis can say opportunity. Well, in this wonderful little book called When No Thing Works, what Norma says, Roshi Norma says, is that another interpretation of those Chinese symbols can be a critical juncture when and where change begins. A critical junction when and where change begins. So things are going on in Washington, and we get this opportunity to say, wow, that feels big, and I'm not sure what I can do about that. Somebody suggested that when he was doing something, one of his many things, they suggested that we have a march beginning on Castro Street, go up Castro Street and then down the street. And I said, I'm not sure of a lot in the world, but I'm relatively certain that Donald Trump and Elon Musk do not care one whit what anybody says on Castro Street in San Francisco. So if it makes people feel better to get together and be connected and walk up and down the street, let's do it. But I'm pretty sure that because they said we must deliver a message to Donald Trump and Elon Musk, it's like, I don't think that just doesn't strike me that the Castro Street message is the one they're looking for. But I do think that we have this power of Sangha, this power of fellowship, and that's really, really what's important, so that we can really come together and say, where are the strengths we have? The strength to remember that in our practice for 30 minutes or some portion of that, we found some sacred stillness. And from that place, we said, wow, if I can do this in the midst of all that's going on, then I have something that I can share with other people. And that's not just whoever sits here, that's all of us. Sometimes when we teach meditation instructions to people, we say, don't listen to the person next to you. There's not a magic Zen breath or a Buddha breath that you should be using while you meditate, because people are sitting there thinking, I'm not breathing right. I want to do it just right. And then you start breathing with the woman next to you or the person next to you on this side, and you're breathing. And then afterwards you talk to that person and they mention that how they're just getting over a terrible cold. And so that labored breathing that you were hearing, that you thought, wow, that's a really deep, resonant breath, is really just the flu. And that takes me to the final point that I want to make. I forgot what time we're supposed to stop. Anybody paying attention? 5 more minutes, takes me to the final thing that I wanted to talk to you about. And I used to talk about it a lot, and I'd sort of stopped for some reason. But I do want to talk about, and it's called what we offer each other, because I think we're all teachers, and in Buddhism, that means you're all monks, you're all bodhisattvas, we say in Zen, which is that you've made an agreement with yourself and your fellowship to live to be of service to other people. And that's the Dalai Lama says the mark of a meaningful life is how much of your life is to be of service to others, you know? And we all have the degrees to which we can do that. And I think we often say, wow, I can't cool down the whole planet, so I'm not going to do anything. I can't change the political environment for healthcare in America, so I'm not going to do anything. And what I want to talk to you about is an invitation to be ministers. And it's a ministry of presence. It's a ministry of presence. Carl Rogers said what deeply troubled people want most is not to be diagnosed or treated. They want somebody to show up who's fully present for them. And I think that is really so important. For those of you that were raised Christian or know the stories from the Old Testament and the Bible, there's the story of Job, who was deeply troubled and going through some things. So he took several of his friends and went and sat down someplace. And the story says this, that they sat with him, the three, for 7 days and 7 nights, and none of them spoke a word. None of them spoke a word. And in that silence, Job was able to come to some realizations about what he was troubled by and what some possible solutions would be. And the solution was that those, and I can't remember if it's 3 or 4, but those people would help him to solve whatever it was. Right? Not because they all have filled with advice and good ideas and directions and suggestions, because they were willing to be fully present for what it was suffering. And so I think it's a couple of things that are reminders in the practice, and there's lots of writings about the ministry of presence. And it's just ministry just means to care for or to soothe or to be with or to provide for others. And so the ministry of presence is just to say, wow, do I have what it takes to show up and be with you and not talk? You know, to say, is there anything I can do for you? And your friend or relative says no. And how many of us, you don't have to raise your hand, you can just smile. How many of us say, oh, okay, well, let me get you some tea, or can I make your bed for you? Can I do some laundry? They said, oh, no, what can I do for you? Nothing, just be here. Or sometimes they say, just go away. But whatever it is they say, to truly listen to that. And it's just a matter of, in sacred stillness, we calm our mind down enough to know that the question is, whose agenda is being served here? Whose agenda? My need to be a fixer, my need to be something, or their need to just feel that suffering, feel that hurt, feel that loss, feel that grief, and just have somebody be there fully with them. In some traditions, when folks die, there's a period of just sitting, and in theory, in silence. I'm Irish Catholic family, but we did anything but silence. It was the exact opposite of that, and it never really worked well. There was always ended up being a funeral and a fight. But the idea of just sitting with people, and I think that's this ministry of presence really allows us to do just that. And so I want to just read 2 little quick things, and then we'll see if anybody has any questions or better ideas. This one is from Grace Cowell, and it says, "Let me come in where you are weeping, friend, and let me take your hand. I, who have known of sorrow such as yours, can understand. Let me come in. I will be very still beside you in your grief. I would not bid you cease weeping, friend. Tears bring relief. Let me come in. I would only breathe a prayer and hold your hand, for I have known a sorrow such as yours, and I understand." So just that capacity to just be still. And, you know, we all are striving, I think, all the time for ways to genuinely be still. And meditation is that gift when we do it for 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes here at the fellowship. And it's just that opportunity to say, maybe I can risk being still for 30 minutes because I know then somebody else is going to talk, and then we're going to go out there and everybody's going to talk. So maybe I can risk it for just a little bit of time. And I think that allows us to say, whatever it is we're facing, whatever it is that's out there in the world waiting for us, we have an opportunity to say, you know, there will be time. There will be time to take care of that. So here's the last thing I'm going to share is a poem from Tabrizi, who's a Sufi poet, When I run after what I think I want, my days are a furnace of stress and anxiety. If I sit in my own place of patience, and what I need flows to me and without pain. From this, I understand that what I want also wants me. What I want also wants me, is looking for me and is attracting me. There is a great secret here that anyone who wants can grasp. May you all find sacred stillness today.
I think we have time for one question.
One question, yes.
Stephen, thank you so much for a really enlightened, actionable talk. I'm going to listen to it many times over. I just got back from the first 6 weeks out of the country on a total news fast, which I just broke this morning.
How'd that go?
Partly thanks to you. It was good. I went back to my carefully curated sources. The first article I read, coincidentally, was about having a VAP partner, V-A-P-P. I don't know if you've heard of it, but someone you can vent with, and this is like a spiritual partner, not just your friend who's going to like become hysterical, but somebody grounded in maybe perhaps the Dharma.
Yeah.
You vent, because that's what's happening, you're feeling it. Then you acknowledge or appreciate what's actually happening, like you talked about. It's not happening right now, but don't spin out of control. And then pivot to the positive, like through art or action or something you can actually do. And you know, you both support each other in this, and if you have someone like that, it can be so cathartic, but then it actually takes you in the right direction, so your hair isn't on fire like you talked about. So
Thank you.
great
That's
practice.
great.
Thank you for the reminder.
I always like to remind people, and I say it a lot, so forgive me that you're going to hear it again, but Ananda said to the Buddha, I think I figured out between practice and studying and meditation, that having good spiritual friends is half the way. And the Buddha said, don't speak to me that way, Ananda, it's the entire way. And it's because of that, you know. Bell Hooks, the poet, says that we should have, same concept as that, she calls them enlightened witnesses. So that I talk to you and you talk to me, and it's somebody, I trust me sometimes, and now I trust you, and I trust that you trust me. And it's I'm gonna look that up when I get back. I like that VAP. Good stuff.
The rest of the article was about psychedelics, but you know. I'll send you the link.
None of us here in San Francisco know anything about that. And I think we've run out of time, and there are cookies and tea waiting for us.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.